So in this video, I want to talk about how you can replicate some of the Amigo features inside of Bitwig Studio. Amigo is some kind of sampler that came out a few weeks ago. It tries to emulate basically sampling on an Amiga. And the Amiga computer back then in the 90s had a lot of limitations compared to what we have now. So you could only sample here in stereo with 22 kilohertz. Also 8 bits per channel. You could sample with 16 bits because it's a 16-bit computer. You could sample with 16 bits, but only in mono, and then you could go up to, I think, 50 kilohertz or something like this. And you are kind of limited with the space. So the RAM with the extended memory, back then Amiga had 1 megabyte of RAM you could use. And also save only on disks. So most people only had disks. Hard drives was super expensive. So the disk was also space of 1 megabyte or something like this. So you had to work with some limitations, and that produced a lot of, artifacts in the sound. So it produced a special sound a lot of people want to replicate nowadays for some reason. So it's kind of funny to explain this actually on how to create these sounds, because back then we tried to get it as clean as possible, right? This was the main goal, make it sound pretty nice and clean and transparent. And nowadays it's completely the opposite. Everyone wants to go back to the, to the artifacts, to the bit reduction and, this crunchiness for some reason. So in here we have the sampling rate we can change. There's a sample space here. You could also use drum loops and then use what it's called slicing. Can you put something in there? We can use slicing. There's also, I think, besides bit reduction, there's slicing and the stretch mode. Yeah, I think that these are the main features of this thing. Mode sample slice, and here's the threshold. I have no idea how this works. Auto slice. Okay, yeah. Okay. And then you have basically all the slices here on the key. So this is something you can't replicate inside of Bitwig because the sampler for some reason has no slicing with this kind of a threshold here. You could use something like my auto sampler preset I made in some of my recent videos. I put a link in the description below so you can watch this. It's kind of a fake grid-based auto slicer, but you usually don't need to do this here. And I think also back in the day we never did something like this. And then there's here this stretch mode we can switch on. We can change the playback length or the speed. And then there's the cycle length here. It's basically like a grain size. People like that it's super crunchy, but it's actually just super raw. It just takes, multiple slices here out of the audio signal and then repeats it. That's basically it. It's not something special or anything like this. We can fake this in Bitwig also pretty nicely. Okay, so maybe reduce the bitrate for a moment. Stretch off. So you can create a sound basically. That's the point of this. So how do we fake this now in Bitwig Studio? And we can fake this in multiple ways. So the first idea would be to just take, let's start like this. Let's take a drum loop here, right? We can play this back. The first thing we need to fake is basically how it would sound like if we would sample this with an Amiga. So we put here a bit 8 on this. And we say we want to sample with 22 kilohertz. A bit of jitter maybe. So the jitter just modulates the clock speed. It brings in some fluctuations, so it's not exactly the same, right? So a bit of jitter here maybe no gate. And then we need to change the bit rate. So the bit rate you can't change in bit 8, which is a bit counterintuitive, but you can change the signal to noise ratio here with this quantization level. And when we look this up here on Wikipedia, it's called audio bit depth. You can see here for 8 bits, we have a signal to noise ratio of 49 dB. This is basically our dynamic range. Below that, the noise basically starts, the noise floor. So here we dial in minus 49. So the first question you probably have in your head, why do we have this instead of a bit slider, right? Why don't we have like a slider where we change 4 bits, 8 bits, 11 bits, 12 bits, right? So why need Bitwig this make so complicated, right? That's the first question. And I don't know why they decided to do this way, but I could imagine, and this is just my imagination, that if you have a slider for these bits here, you make these weird jumps, right? So 12 bits to 16 bits, you have like, 20 dB more headroom, kind of. So it's not nice to modulate this kind of slider. Also, if you have here this drop downs, you know how hard it is to actually modulate this if you want to change it. So you always prefer something where you can fluidly move from one point to the other, right? And with this headroom slider here, or with this dynamic range slider, it's not a headroom slider, this dynamic range slider, you can morph basically or fluidly move between the bit depth. So this is my idea. This is why I think they did this. So you can fluidly morph between 16 bits and 80 bits or 24 bits and so on. So reducing here the dynamic range gives you basically the this kind of bit reduction or this quantization. Also the quantization on 0, I usually use here off 0. It's basically when you use an analog signal, there are no stepped points in this analog signal, and then you quantize it with a digital converter, and then you put some of these samples on the grid or off the grid, so you can decide with this here. So this should sound already like we sampled this on Amiga. Right, you can hear this small little noise on top, the small little crunch of the quantization process. Yeah, that's how it is. So then we need to sample it, of course, to another audio track here. So I use here the output of audio 2, audio post, and then we just sample this. Just a part of this. And then we put this into the sampler, of course. This is here audio 3. Put this in there, so we don't need here the default modulators. We also don't need here the velocity sensitivity. We don't need voices, so monophonic. This is how it sounds on C3 here. Okay, so this is how it would sound like inside of the Amiga if you just play it back, kind of. But like I said in the beginning, back in the day, we hadn't that much space, only 1 megabyte of RAM, right? So what we did back in the day, we used to play this back much faster. So let me change this here. This is raw. Let's go to pitch. Let's put this in half here, or maybe not in half. Maybe let's go to just 85. Right, you play this back much faster, and then you sample this again. Actually, let's put this exactly 686. Okay, let's sample this in here again. right? Also just a bit. So now the sample is much, much shorter than before because we played it back at, you know, double speed, more or less. So the sample also goes in half, so you don't need to have that much space. You saved a bit of RAM, a bit of disk space. So then we put this here back into the sampler. I have to do this again. And when we now play this back, of course it's too fast, but now we can pitch it down just 1 octave. You know, it's the same length as the original. We increased a bit of noise, of course. We pitch it down here, and then we bring up all the artifacts, all the quantization effects, and so on. So we get this crunch. But we saved a lot of space, and we had not much space back then. So space was very important. Okay, so now that we have this, we can basically try to replicate here some slicing. So back then, I would probably go in here, play it back. Oh, we need to stop this here. So this is how the breakbeat sounds. So I would use here pitch 12 and say C is actually the kick drum, but the second one here, let's say go to D here, and D changes the play offset here. It's modulated. Okay, so we have this. Oh, we need to disable also the pitch and pull this down to C4. Oh, I can't change this. We need probably to use 50% here. Let's put it here. So usually you only need maybe 2, 3, or 4 different points inside of this drum loop to get some different effects or some different, or to rearrange it in a meaningful way. Maybe you want to use the kick drum here as a start point, maybe here the first snare, or maybe a different snare here where you have some rolls after this to fake some kind of complex drum break. Maybe we use here another one, this here, and we change the position to we have a nice roll in there. Okay, so now that we have this, we can also try to replicate this kind of stretch mode, the Akai stretch mode. So we use here a textures mode, which is just that. You can change here the cycle size. If you watch here, I have a thing on that. So on the Akai, it looks like this. You put it basically here into the cyclic mode, and then you have a time factor, which is more or less here the speed setting. And then we have a cycle length, which is the grain setting. So this is how it works. So we can use here maybe a channel modulator. And we use channel 2. Channel 2 for different speed setting, different grain size. Let's see how this works. And put all these nodes here on channel 2. Oh yeah, we need here different speed. Can we change actually here the mode? Oh yeah, we can. Let's go to repitch here, and this one goes to texture. I just use 1. I think it's 2 actually. Yeah, 2. And then we can say we only want to use maybe here, this kind of time stretching. It's hard to modulate if it's not, you know, available. That's cool. So this is how I would do it inside of Bitwig Studio. You have a bit of more options you can choose from here. It's not that simple anymore, but you know, you can fake it if you want to. Another idea, instead of doing it this way here, by sampling this with a bit 8 and then recording and then put it into the sampler, you can also fluidly simulate this after the sampler here, instead of sampling it beforehand. So let's say we have a clean sample here. This one here, put it in there, right? Maybe I remove this here for a moment. So this is how it would sound normally, right? Then you put the bit 8 on it, 22 kilohertz, 8-bit. So now you want to pitch it down 1 octave. But the bit rate here and also the sampling rate stays the same. But we can now use a key track on that. If you pull up here the help, it says set the parameter to C3 and then set the modulation amount to plus 16 semitones. So we just do that here, 60. And we also maybe want to reduce the bit rate here. I think we have to do it this way. Yeah, minus 16. So now if I use C3, we play it back at 22 kilohertz, but if I use 1 octave lower, we also reduce here the sampling rate and the bit rate, or the dynamic range. So we kind of fake in a very, in a very fluid way how a sample would sound with some reduced bit rate when we pitch it down, or when we sample it with 22 kilohertz and then pitch it down inside of sample. We completely fake this here. It's not inside of the sample. The sample itself is completely clean. And bit 8 helps us then to put all the grid on top live. Let's put this here to C2. So now at C3, we have double speed, like before, like we sampled with the double speed, right? But when you play it back 1 octave lower, we have 11 kilohertz, but the original speed. So we can also kind of fake this, and then you can go on and use here the pitch 12 to use some slicing, and also the channel to introduce a bit of, or the channel modulator to introduce this time stretching mode, right? So we can fake this in multiple ways. The same thing you can do with non-drum loops. So for instance here, if you want to use some original samples, I think Chris Hulsbeck used a lot of M1 here to M1 for the Turrican soundtrack and so on. It already sounds like a sounds from Turrican, in my opinion. So we sampled this here 1 octave higher, maybe here. Audio track, mute, record, output M1. Pre-roll is off, okay. That's enough. And delete this. And in here we use the sound. Pull this up. Detect root key is C5. Okay. You can hear all the dirt. Maybe a bit higher, C5, C6. Maybe it's better to have it here. So you get this Amiga sound, yeah, kind of roughly how it sounded back then, just with the sampler here and with a bit 8 and a bit of key track modulations. So this is how I would do it inside of Bitwig Studio. It's not, of course, again, if you want to replicate another VST inside of Bitwig, it's not that fluid because you can't replicate the interface and all the workflow process and so on. But if you don't own the plugin, if you don't want to use a VST plugin, you can kind of fake it pretty easily here just with a bit 8 and a bit of key tracking and a bit of sampler stuff. Maybe let's try a textures mode on this. It doesn't sound that good. Okay. So yeah, that's it for this video. I want to show you how to do this inside of Bitwig. Have some fun experimenting. Ask some questions in the comments below, and maybe also tell me where I'm wrong in this video. Thanks for watching, and bye.